Welcome to Education in Our Community. I am Reverend Robert L. McKnight, your co-host, along with the renowned Dr. Barbara Cannon. And we shall be discussing the Black family, reclaiming, restructuring, and restoring. Dr. Cannon, it is great to be with you again.
Yes, indeed.
And the last time we were together, we ended on the note of the importance of the family and how it is that the family is the first level of government in any society, and that the government cannot be any stronger than the families in which it governs. And so if we're going to look at, and this is an election year coming up, if we're going to look at a restructuring of the government, we must first look at a restructuring of the family.
Yes, I was thinking that the word reclaiming as the first word.
Yes.
There's so many R's that are so relevant to this process.
Yes.
But reclaiming is necessary also because
That's
I think
right.
a lot of devastation has affected families in America.
Yes.
And we know that the Black family has suffered from the beginning of the slave trade.
Yes.
But even perhaps before that, it had to do, because I think there were some people who got here, like Phyllis Wheatley, before the slave trade. I don't know if she was brought over after that or not.
Yes.
But it's about the history of this country, and that the Black family was in peril from the beginning.
Yes.
And the process of reclaiming is a very, I would say, difficult task. And that's why I really felt your wisdom when you mentioned the family as the basic governmental entity in any society.
Yes.
And I know that in Africa, the concept of family is very strong, and yet I know that the values that impact the family, like looking at the core values, and I would think that you don't necessarily have to adapt the same model that's used in Africa, but something that addresses the core values that a healthy family would have anywhere on this planet, even if it's on the moon or, let's say, Venus. What are your views about the family and the values that help to make it strong and resilient?
As we were sharing after our last show, quote by Dr. Andrew Billingsley, who for years was a professor of sociology at the University of California, later to become president at 2 or 3 of our historical Black colleges and universities. Dr. Billingsley says in the foreword of his book, Black Families in White America, that the family is the most basic institution of any people, the center and source of its civilization, and that within the intimate context of the family, individuals develop their concepts of themselves, their values, and their worth in relations to the others in their world. That first sentence that says that the family is the most basic institution. A psychologist, Dr. Naeem Akbar, states basically the same thing when he says that the family is the foundation of a people, of a nation, and that the people or nation can never become any stronger than the foundation. And if the foundation is weakened, then that upon which it is built is also placed in jeopardy.
Yes, I'm listening to what you're saying very strongly. I'm reading the book about Antoine Fisher. It's called Finding Fish. Have you read that? It's about his life. This is a true story about a young man. Denzel Washington made the movie.
I was going to say, I saw the film.
Yes.
I didn't know that there was a novel, there was a book out.
Oh, it's his book. Antoine Fisher wrote this book about his life.
Yes, I definitely saw the film.
Yeah, and that's where the film was derived from, that book, Finding Fish. But because of the devastation with which his whole being started, his father having been killed, his mother imprisoned, and she was like a teenage mother, then evidently she wasn't able to take him and raise him. He was given to the system to take care of. But it's that thing about finding himself and an identity. The psychologist or psychiatrist was Denzel Washington in the Navy, and indicated you need to find your family. And he didn't believe it. He didn't believe finding his family was crucial until finally, after the insistence of the psychologist or psychiatrist, actually, he finally realized, I will do it. I'll go find my family, because he believed so strongly in the psychiatrist. He really loved him and admired him and respected him. So I really think that some people are hanging on by their fingernails for a sense of family. And that's why I wanted to talk about this topic, because the focus for the family is one way to strengthen, because sometimes a family is not comprised of a lot of people. It could be just a mother raising a child.
Could be two.
And that's right. And it could be other relatives to go with it. Plus, I heard you say something about neighborhood having significance.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you teach a course on the Black family.
Right. What the first thing, we must reclaim the family. We have lost a sense, observation. It's not criticism, condemnation, or being judgment, or observation. It appears that we have lost a sense of the value and the strength of the family. I don't think that we value it as a unit as much as we used to in society. We can look at the ads, TV commercials. Seldom do you see an example of a strong family unit. Generally, it may be at the expense of the father or the mother, but seldom do you see a wholesome family projected on television. I don't think that we have seen this since the Cosby Show.
That's correct. That's very correct. In fact, I saw the Bill Cosby last night. He was given the Mark Twain Award, and his family was all there with him, and they were up in the balcony, and he was being honored by people who were comedians or other strong people who had helped to initiate the I Spy film that he was moving, ongoing series. So it showed that the power of the family was being acknowledged by the young man who played his son. As I think he was 13 years old. And then Felicia Rashad, who played his wife. And then they showed the whole family doing a dance together. A beautiful rendition that showed the talent of every member of that family. And then even the grandparents were there admiring the performance. That was a beautiful scene. So they shared excerpts from his life as a father figure, but also as a successful, intelligent, highly, you might say, astute individual who knew how to make things happen in a healthy way. So I really thought it showed a lot about the power of a single individual to make a difference.
Now, Dr. Searick Lincoln, the late Dr. Searick Lincoln, in his book, The Black Church in America, Dr. Lincoln said that in days past and gone, it was the black family, the black church, and the black school that joined hands together to rear up our youth, our children. And of course, he was primarily speaking, when he said black schools, about prior to integration in the South, when they had that legal doctrine of separate but inherently unequal. And we had a separate school system. And my formative years being spent in the rural South, in a small town in Louisiana, I remember very vividly that model, because my first grade teacher was also my next door neighbor.
Neighborhood, neighborhood.
Neighborhood.
All right.
And due to the restrictions, due to Jim Crow laws, We were a very close-knit neighborhood.
Yes.
There was literally a manifestation of, I am my brother's keeper. No one went in want while another had something to share. Everyone in times of trouble, from within the meager resources of that neighborhood, we went to their aid.
You were family.
We were family. You belong not only to your biological family, but you belong to the larger family of humanity within that segregated neighborhood, that town. And so everyone became your aunt or your uncle or your grandparent. And so there was something of that model. Dr. Chancellor Williams, in The Destruction of Black Civilization, about ancient African history, and chapter 6 of his book, he talks about the age grade that existed in these ancient communities, how you were assigned to an age grade, maybe from birth to age 12, from 12 to 18, from 18 to 28, from 28 to 40, etc. And what you had to do, your two main roles, number one, you had to set an example for the age group below you. And then you had to respect the age group above you. So everyone knew their role. And he talked about, and he talks about the purpose of manhood and womanhood training and how it prepared you for your role within that ancient society. And he said for women, the most important training was how to be a successful and an everlastingly desirable wife, and how this training that they received was given by the older women away from the community. Both groups received the same intellectual training, but they received different training in terms for their role within that family, within that neighborhood. And so they knew what was expected of them. The young girl knew it because from following her mother around, she learned how to communicate from listening to her mother, whole conversations, how to cook, etc., and so forth. The son realized it, depending upon whether it was a matrilineal or patrilineal society, from carrying the stool of his father, of his uncle, to the local village council meetings. And then when they left that neighborhood, that family, they were given instructions as to their role and how to maintain the institutions within that given society in that village. And we do not have any form of instructions today to maintain the most valuable and powerful and influential institution in all civilization, the family.
Have you heard of Carolyn Ashe Stokes? She's Arthur Ashe's first cousin.
Yes.
And she has developed a model, and I certainly hope it gets implemented. It's called Family Management Education. And we did a television series for the Oakland Unified School District with Superintendent Chaconis. When he was still there.
I remember him.
And it was called Family Parent Education Television.
Yes.
We wanted to do a series that would help to, it was a pilot project, but unfortunately we were only able to get it shown several times, and he was ending his career with the district at that time. But her family management education curriculum, her passion has been exactly what you're describing. She served as a state senator with the state of California, a senior. The seniors every year would go and take roles as senior legislators for the state of California.
Yes.
And in that role, she developed this design for a holistic education, like a circle of life, from birth to age 25
Yes.
was the first quadrant.
That's
Age
first
25 to
generation.
50 was the adult.
Second
And then
generation.
from 50 to 75 were the seniors.
Yes.
And then 75 to 100 and above were the elders.
Yes.
And every one of those had certain maturity characteristics
Yes.
that were developed. And so her whole passion, and I certainly hope she gets to implement it fully, because I've had a show with her here in this studio about that, but also with the Knoxes, Dr. Jerome Knox and Dr. Liz Dunbar Knox,
Yes.
who taught family parent education at Merritt College. Also,
Yes, I
they taught a
remember
course
that.
called Parenting, Grandparenting, and it was the work that they did was phenomenal. I remember another course that they taught young men. These were young men who were incarcerated, who had impregnated several young ladies. And there was a counselor there who worked with the juvenile justice system, who had them enroll in a class because they had had these children and had no connection with their own children. So 2 men taught the course to these young men. Dr. Jerome Knox was one, and the other one, I've forgotten his name, the 2 of them. But it was a perfectly good class, and at the end of the class, those young men got a certificate. But the capacity building that they got is what
Yes.
you described in your model. That was Chancellor Williams.
Dr. Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization.
And that structure was destroyed,
Yes, sir.
but not by accident. It
No.
was perhaps
Nor
okay,
coincidence. It was by design.
design. So if this designing and restructuring, as you said in the title, reclaiming, restructuring, and restoring,
Yes.
something that previously exists. So reclaiming is very important, but then restructuring,
Yes.
putting it back together again.
Putting it back together, and that is so important.
Putting it back together again. So designing it, it's not all that complicated, I would imagine. What do you think?
The model is already there.
It's there.
You know, it's just the reclamation of it, is the claiming of it, or the reclaiming that this is mine.
That's right.
I have been a part of this.
Yes.
It exists. Many people, it's not only taught anthropologically and sociologically, but also in religion. Most holy books, I know that the Bible particularly talks about handing down to the next generation, passing down the values of this generation, that belief system, teaching it to the next generation. And this has been interrupted, severely interrupted, particularly in the Black family. You stated Dr. Knox and his wife and the work they were doing with the young men who became fathers at an early age. You will remember, matter of fact, you brought him to Merritt College, and I later brought him to Berkeley.
Yes.
The late Ron Johnson out of Los Angeles.
Yes.
And he had this Rites of Passage program.
Yes.
And Ron said there at Merritt College, when he came, that when young women become pregnant and give birth and do not marry, and he said most of the time the young men do not marry because they cannot afford to take care of the child.
Yes.
And so when a child is born and a family is not formed, it weakens the community.
Yes.
Because the family is that basic unit. And it is not unusual. I don't know if you remember or you know Achebe Hopkins.
Yes.
Achebe came and did a presentation, our first one for African American History Month, yesterday. And what a marvelous show Achebe put on. But in there, he also made some very key points in terms of the development of the family within the neighborhood, within the community, and that how the neighborhood in which you live in is a reflection of the families which comprises that
Yes,
neighborhood.
yes. And if the families that are within this situation are in a toxic situation, it's very difficult to pull it together because we're in the midst of, you might say, a country or where people are taught to be individually oriented, you know, the strength of the individual versus the collective. You know, the group is sometimes not as strong as the individual. The individual can be rebellious and not even wanting to be a part of the whole because the group itself is so weak. So in a sense, it's about how to bring that group back to a strength. And how, do you have any ideas about how to get that restructuring going?
Good point and good question. And we can emphasize it simply because it is African American History Month, but we cannot end it nor expect to accomplish it by the 28th of February.
No, we can't do it in a month.
But it is a good reminder.
Yes.
In reclaiming the family, you must do the same thing for your history. If you don't know who you are, then you cannot relate to anyone else. All the most important knowledge, Malcolm used to say, is knowledge of self.
Self, that's right.
And see, this has become fragmented where our institutions, our schools, should play a role.
Yes.
But the primary source in identity is the family.
So therefore, family parent education, and that was the motivation for that television series that we were trying to implement with a pilot project. And this show, I believe, is about that too, education in our community, the family as a focus, because it has to do with the need for pulling the components of the family together so that education is a lifelong journey.
Yes,
and
it
it's
is.
for all ages. It isn't just
It
for
is.
children.
No.
And I think sometimes adult education gets pushed aside, and I think community colleges are very instrumental in saying your life is not over just because your children are now here. You still can continue your journey as being educated. And so I think the first opportunity, the second opportunity, the third opportunity, that one can continuing education can be continued, even by professionals. I haven't heard it said that medical doctors need to keep up to date.
Yes.
The family of doctors.
Yes.
And the neighborhood in which they live.
Yes.
And I like the fact that Dr. Ben Carson prays for his patients before he does those marvelous surgeries that he does.
Yes.
But his family, his mother had to raise I think there were three boys or two boys. One brother became an engineer. Dr. Ben Carson became this neurosurgeon.
Yes.
But it was because the mother, who only had, I think it was a 5th grade education.
Yes.
She worked for a wealthy person who had a marvelous library. And she found out that she could be allowed to read his books. And somehow she became instrumental in seeing how they did what they did in terms of parenting. And she decided that she would not let her boys, I think they were in Detroit, they would not be devastated by going to school on a daily basis, having to fight just to get to school every day. And then he was given a lot of opportunities because of her determination as a single mother to raise her sons. Yeah. So I really think that's when you see the family sometimes could not necessarily be holistic in the sense of all of the components that you would like would be there, but you have to go with what is sometimes in restructuring.
Yeah, and our mothers do a marvelous job in rearing up children in the absence of the father.
That's right.
But that does not negate the importance of the role of a man, a father, in that household.
You're so right.
Two things. One, Ron Johnson said, and he acknowledged it. He says that mothers are so instrumental. And he gave examples of individuals who were reared in a single-parent home. Mm-hmm. But he says the one thing that your mother cannot do, when you come to the point of crossing that bridge, that takes you from your boyhood into your manhood. Your mother cannot take you across that bridge because she's never been across that bridge.
That's right.
You need a man to take you by the hand and say, I've been across that bridge. Take my hand, I'll take you across.
That's right.
I'll show you how to stay away from drugs and all the other entrapments.
Right. So that's why I think the neighborhood becomes an asset to work with, because the mother can't do it all by herself.
She cannot.
So therefore, the neighborhood would have some men in there. And it shows how we can begin to look at the neighborhood as a vital component.
Yes.
Thank you, Reverend McKnight, for this wonderful opportunity. The family as the critical institution for America.
Thank you. It's been a joy.
Thank you.
Oh, that.